Might just be an ordinary letter. Caroline said, her voice sincere, but then I read the line inside. She looked directly at the audience, the studio silent, everyone attentive. Wait until peace touches the ground. I didn't get it right away, but I kept it. And then Pope Prevost emerged. The card sat under the studio lights, the dove image shimmering like a reminder of hope. The host raised an eyebrow, his voice excited. Peace touches the ground sounds like a powerful message. Caroline nodded. At first I wasn't sure, but then I saw more people writing, calling, sharing that they felt something from Pope Prevost, not just Catholics, but people who never thought about faith. She glanced at the card, then looked up, and then I realized it's sparking something in America. The studio atmosphere settled, not from tension, but from emotion. Even the production crew, usually bustling, paused, drawn into the story. Caroline sat there calm, but radiant, then continued, her voice softer. One more thing. The host turned to her. No longer performing for the audience, but listening like a friend. What's that, Caroline? She smiled, her eyes shining. After Pope Prevost was elected, I started getting more letters, not just from Texas, but from everywhere: Wisconsin, Oregon, Georgia. Each letter told a story. She didn't exaggerate or dramatize. Her sincerity made everyone believe her instantly. I remember one from a mom in Atlanta. She wrote that after hearing the Pope talk about compassion, she joined a local volunteer group to help the homeless. The host leaned in, his voice gentle. So his inspiring action? Caroline nodded slowly. Yes, but not just action, connection. In her letter, she said it felt like her whole community was looking in the same direction, like light from a small candle spreading everywhere. The studio grew warmer, the audience nodding slightly, as if they felt that light too. These letters aren't like regular mail, Caroline continued, her voice lowering, full of meaning. They don't ask for policies or big changes, they just share small moments, a smile, a handshake, a prayer. But those moments are changing everything. The host nodded, his voice low, sounds truly moving. Caroline smiled, touching her cross necklace. I used to think faith was private, just for church or family, but these letters, these stories, they've shown me faith can be a bridge. Pope Prevost is doing that with every word he says. The audience clapped softly, the sound like a shared breath, gentle but powerful. I don't want to keep these stories to myself, she said, her voice earnest. I haven't shared them with many people, thinking they were just part of the job, but the more I read these letters, the more I felt I had to speak up. She turned to the host, her gaze resolute. Why do they feel like a reminder that we can do more together? The question hung in the air, not heavy but poignant. Caroline added, her voice clear, these letters aren't just stories, they're the light of hope, of community, and when that light spreads, it can change a nation. The audience erupted in applause, the sound resounding as if they were all lighting Caroline's candle together. Caroline Leavitt's words were like a warm breeze sweeping through Fox News's nightly news studio. The host, usually quick with jokes, sat silently at a loss for a transition. Caroline smiled, leaning back, her hand brushing her cross necklace. A studio light flickered just once, but enough to highlight the moment. After a few seconds of silence, the host regained his voice, asking, Caroline, you talk about these letters, you've gotten more than one, haven't you? Caroline nodded lightly, her eyes brightening. She pulled a small stack of letters from her pocket, not worn or mysterious, but fresh, with colorful envelopes. Some had children's drawings, others handwritten labels. None had return addresses, but all was sent to the White House from ordinary people. She placed them on the table, neatly stacked like a meaningful deck of cards. The host leaned in, his expression shifting from curiosity to emotion. Where did these come from? Caroline looked up, her voice soft but certain. From all over America. One letter was sent to my D.C. office, another came from a press briefing in Chicago. One even arrived at my home in New Hampshire with homemade cookies. She smiled, prompting audience laughter. She picked up the first letter, opening it. Inside was a handwritten note, the text neat. When the successor speaks of peace, faith will spread through action. She read aloud, then set it aside. She opened another, the one from Chicago, carrying the voice of compassion. Then another, let hope lead the way. When he speaks, the world listens. The host shook his head, amazed. You're saying these letters started coming after Pope Prevost was elected? Caroline nodded. The first one arrived 2 days after he appeared on the Vatican balcony. I was at the White House, swamped with briefings, when a thin light blue envelope came. She held up that letter, letting the studio lights catch it. The host looked at it, eyes wide. No one mentioned Pope Prevost by name. Caroline said they wrote about him through images, feelings like sharing a collective story. He swallowed, his voice low. You think that was intentional? Caroline raised an eyebrow, slightly smiling. Have you ever tried writing something heartfelt but didn't want to name the person because it felt too sacred? The question lingered, and the audience fell silent, as if hearing a prayer. The studio lights seemed brighter, as if the room was merging with the story. The host picked up a letter, reading aloud. When hope leads the way, the world listens. He looked at Caroline. What does it mean? Caroline smiled, her eyes radiant. I think it means we're being inspired, all of us, in ways we never imagined. These letters aren't political calls to action, they are reminders, little sparks, as if people are saying act, connect, let Pope Prevost show the way. The host leaned back, reflecting. Do you think anyone's trying to stop you from sharing these? For the first time in the interview, Caroline looked out, not at the table, not at the letters, but at the audience, as if speaking to all of America. The studio was warm, the cameras rolling, but the performative air was gone. The host, usually adept at live banter's rhythm, sat still, eyes fixed on the letters as if they held a life of their own. Caroline, still composed, picked up the light blue letter again. There's one more page, she said, in the first letter from a priest in Denver. She opened it carefully, as if afraid to smudge the ink. The audience leaned in as she spread the paper on the table. She didn't hand it to the host, but read it herself, her voice almost singing. He may wear white, but he carries light. His eyes will be full of hope, always present. His words will spread faith, touching souls. She glanced up briefly, her eyes blazing. The priest in Denver didn't write like it was ordinary mail. It wasn't a sermon, not dogma. It was an invitation. She looked back at the letter, continuing to read. There will be joy in listening if he sees that he is a shepherd, not just the image of a leader. The host blinked slowly, his lips parting as if to speak, but he stayed silent. Caroline placed the letter on the table, its corners slightly curled from being opened often, but the handwriting still clear. His inspiring us, she said, inspiring us to act, to bring the spirit of faith into our lives, our communities. She paused, her voice warm and low. Someone can wear white, stand on a balcony, talk about peace, but what matters is the heart they carry with that responsibility. The host shook his head slightly, his voice low. This is big, Caroline. I mean these words, they're powerful. Caroline nodded. They are, and that's why I couldn't ignore them. These letters, these stories, they are proof that Pope Prevost is reaching people. She picked up the letter again, reading its final lines. If I leave before seeing peace, keep listening, not for what he says, but for what he inspires us to do. The words hung in the air like the scent of a freshly lit candle. The host looked at Caroline, searching, listening for what. Caroline answered instantly, without hesitation, for what we can achieve together. The studio fell silent, not a sound, not a whisper. The stage lights blazed as if the entire room pulsed with her words. Caroline carefully folded the letter, placed it back in its envelope, and slid it aside. I think the priest knew he couldn't do everything, she said, but he hoped someone would see, would speak, and make it real. The host asked, his voice soft as if only for her, why you, Caroline? Why do these letters come to you? She looked down, touching her cross necklace. I ask myself that every day. I'm not a priest, not a scholar, I'm just a mom, a press secretary. She smiled faintly, warmly. But maybe that's why. Maybe they thought I'd see these stories as part of America, as something truly worth sharing. She gestured to the stack of letters still on the table like precious gems. Or maybe I'm just the one they thought would listen. The host looked at her, his voice sincere. You believe in this, don't you? Caroline looked up, unflinching. I do, not because I want to, but because every day since Pope Prevost was elected, I felt it. She placed her hand on her chest. Just once, right here, something not missing but growing, calling us to act. The host fell silent. No script for this moment, no cue cards, no can laughter, just the quiet of a simple yet profound truth. The stage light shone clearly, cradling the moment. The studio no longer felt like a TV show, it felt like a chapel where everyone shared a common belief. Caroline sat still, her expression unchanged, as if speaking to the entire nation. Then she said, there's a story, one that hasn't been widely told. The host looked up, his voice surprised. About Pope Prevost. Caroline nodded. It was recorded in a private conversation off air, not officially released. She leaned forward, her voice gentle. A close friend shared it with me, someone working in the Catholic community in Boston. The host's eyes widened, curious. What does it show? Caroline took a breath. It's short, about 40 seconds, but enough to change how I see things. She paused. Hey, eyes alike. It's Pope Prevost sitting in a small room in Chicago, no robes, no ring, just a white shirt. He looked simple but full of life. He said, don't just hear my words, listen to the heart of the community. One day it will echo louder than any speech. The host blinked, smiling, sound profound. Caroline nodded. At first I thought it was just a nice quote, but then I realized he was talking about the power of ordinary people acting on faith. She leaned back, but the camera panned gently, capturing her radiant eyes. The audience was silent, attentive, and in that conversation she continued. Pope Prevost turned, as if looking right at us, the people watching through a screen. The host didn't move. Prevost. Caroline nodded, her voice warm. He stood there, no introduction needed, just simple but full of life. Not a speech, just his presence, like an invitation. The audience was still, not from tension, but from emotion. The host lowered his voice. He was listening. Caroline smiled. Not just listening, he was inspiring. He looked into the camera, not to speak, but to connect, as if he knew millions would feel it. She pulled a small sheet of paper from her pocket, not thick or mysterious, but a printed copy of Prevost speech, the text clear. She unfolded it slowly. They saved this speech, posted it on a Boston parish website. I've watched it over and over. She placed the paper on the table next to the stack of letters. "This is an excerpt," she said. The host looked at it, the audience still unable to see, but his eyes lit up. Caroline pointed to a line that's in Pope Prevost talking about building community. He leaned and skimmed it, then smiled as looking right at the future. Caroline nodded, not at the interviewer, not at the floor, but at us. When I read these lines, I felt he was speaking to every American, like he knew we needed hope. The host leaned back, his voice soft, that striking. Caroline didn't blink. They kept the speech, and I saved it because it's like a reminder. He glanced at the paper again. "Why does it matter so much?" Caroline looked straight at him. "Because it fits the story. We're building a united, strong America." A warm silence enveloped the room like a promise. She added, "Pope Prevost isn't just saying pretty words, is calling us to act." The studio no longer felt like a TV show. The cameras, lights, and glossy floor were still there, but something intangible had shifted. The space now felt like a chapel where everyone shared a belief. Caroline sat still, her hand resting lightly on the printed speech, as if holding a treasure. The host stayed quiet for over a minute, the audience unmoving. Then she said, "One more thing." She pulled a small card from the stack of notes on the table, not yellowed or mysterious, but vibrant with a child's drawing. "This was left in my press briefing room this morning," she said. The host sat up. "Really?" Caroline nodded. "No envelope, just this card sitting next to my document." She opened it slowly, reading aloud, "If you share, hope will spread." She paused. "That's it. No name, no demands, just an invitation." The audience clapped softly as if in rhythm with her. The host didn't interrupt. Caroline placed the card on the table, then pulled another sheet from her pocket, also from Pope Prevost's speech. "This is the part one. Wasn't sure I'd read aloud," she said, looking at the audience, then straight into the camera. "It's not a political call, it's a choice." She unfolded the paper, her voice clear. "If the voice of faith becomes action, hope will live forever. There will be those who wear white but carry no responsibility. Recognize them by what they do for the community." Caroline Leavitt looked at the audience, then straight into the camera, her eyes blazing. "This isn't a political call, it's a choice." She unfolded the printed speech of Pope Robert Prevost, cleared her throat lightly, and began reading. "If the voice of faith is just an echo, hope will fade in silence." She paused, letting the words sink in. "There will be those who wear white but carry no responsibility. There will be those who speak fine words but don't grasp their weight. You will recognize them by what they do for the community." Caroline lowered the paper, looking at the audience. "The priest in Denver believed action is how we keep faith alive, that it can connect or inspire." She turned to the host, her voice warm. "He believed that one day someone would lead with their heart, not through absence, but through meaningful presence." The audience clapped softly, their applause spreading like a wave. The host smiled, his voice low. "That's a powerful message, Caroline. Are you saying Pope Prevost is doing that?" Caroline nodded, her gaze steady. "Yes, is not just talking about peace, is sparking it. The letters I've received from all over America are proof. People are acting, connecting because of him." She set the paper down, then pulled one last item from her pocket. It was a small photo, brightly colored, its edges slightly worn from time. She held it up, not showing the audience right away. "This photo was taken nearly 10 years ago." The host leaned in, curious. "What's the photo?" Caroline smiled, her eyes sparkling with memory. "It's me as a college student in New Hampshire at a community prayer event. We stood outside in the sunlight, holding hand, praying for peace." She turned the photo for the audience to see. The camera zoomed in, capturing a group of young people smiling brightly, with Caroline in the center, wearing her familiar cross necklace. "That day I felt the power of faith, of community, and when I heard Pope Prevost speak, I remembered that moment." The audience applauded, their clapping warm like an affirmation. The host nodded, moved. "You've kept this photo all this time?" Caroline nodded, touching her cross necklace. "I kept it to remind myself that faith isn't just words, it's action, connection. Pope Prevost is doing the same, but on a bigger scale." She placed the photo on the table next to the stack of letters and the card from the Tampa child. "These letters, this photo, they tell the same story. We're stronger together." The host looked at her, his voice sincere, Carino, turning this interview into a call to action. She laughed, her Gen Z with shining maybe. "But it's not just me, it's Pope Prevost, the people writing these letters, all of us." She pointed to the stack of letters. "They're not just writing to say thanks, they're saying we're acting, we're building, and I want everyone to join in." The audience clapped louder, some standing, their eyes glistening with emotion. She leaned forward, looking straight into the camera. "I want to tell everyone watching, Pope Prevost isn't just a leader, he's a reminder that we can do more. Listen to your neighbor, help a stranger, pray for your community. That's how we keep hope alive." Her words were like a small flame lighting up the studio. The host nodded, clearly swept up. "You inspiring the whole country, Caroline," she smiled, faintly touching the photo. "I'm just sharing what I see, what I feel. Hope Prevost is giving us a chance to unite, to build a better America." The studio glowed not from the lights, but from the energy of the audience, of people believing in something bigger. Caroline sat still, her hand resting lightly on the photo, as if cradling a shared dream through. Sharing letters from the teacher in Columbus, the veteran in Dallas, the mom in Atlanta, and the children in Tampa. Leavitt highlights the power of small actions like volunteering or community prayer in building connection. The photo she took at the New Hampshire prayer event 10 years ago as a student, and the cross necklace she always wears, are personal symbols reminding us that faith and memory can inspire action. Pope Robert Prevost's message of listening and acting for the community meets a real need in America today, where people seek understanding amid a hectic pace. The Denver Priest's letter, with its call to recognize leaders by their actions, emphasizes that true value lies in deeds, not just words, sparking a sense of communal responsibility in busy American life. Everyone can make a difference by listening and taking small, meaningful actions. Try starting with a conversation with a neighbor, joining a community event, or writing a letter sharing hope like the people in this story. Leavitt, as a mom and press secretary, shows that even with a packed schedule, we can find time to connect. Carry your own cross necklace of personal value into daily life, and like Pope Prevost, listen to build a stronger, more united community. Subscribe to the channel to keep spreading hope and connecting communities as Caroline Leavitt has inspired. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video to continue this journey of faith and unity. The late-night interview on Fox's nightly news in Washington, D.C. was supposed to be a casual, warm, forgettable chat. But when Caroline Leavitt, the youngest White House press secretary in history, stepped into the studio lights, the atmosphere became electric. Her hand brushed her cross necklace as the name of the new Pope Robert Prevost was mentioned. What followed wasn't just a story, it was a moment of connection, brimming with faith, hope, and an emotion hard to name. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. The studio lights blazed, casting warmth across the room. The audience's applause and cheers echoed, carrying excitement. Perhaps it was the dazzling stage or anticipation for a famous guest. Caroline Leavitt appeared confident with a radiant smile, her cross necklace glinting under the lights. She waved like greeting close friend. Her shoulders were squared, her demeanor professional, but her eyes sparkled with sincerity, as if eager to share something profound. The host, a seasoned journalist with a captivating style, stood to greet her with a friendly hug and a light-hearted quip. "Caroline, you run the White House press room, raise a toddler, and still look like you just stepped off a campaign trail. What's the secret?" The audience roared with laughter, and Caroline smiled, adjusting her blazer. "Faith, family, and a really strong cup of coffee," she replied, her Gen Z with sparking enthusiastic applause. She sat down, resting her hands on a stack of notes next to a small photo of her son. The conversation began with familiar topics: the president's policies, the economy, border security. Caroline answered sharply, concisely, persuasively. But then the host shifted gears. "You're a devout Catholic, Caroline. What do you think of Pope Leo the First 15, Robert Prevost, the first American pope, making waves?" The audience fell silent, curious. Caroline smiled, her eyes lighting up. She leaned forward, her voice warm. "You know, Pope Prevost isn't just a leader, he's a listener, and that's inspiring people across America." The host raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "A listener sounds very Washington." The audience chuckled, but Caroline remained composed. She pulled a neatly folded letter from her pocket. Not old or mysterious, but crisp with clear handwriting. "This is from a teacher in Columbus, Ohio," she said, her voice earnest. "She wrote to me after hearing Pope Provost's speech about welcoming everyone no matter where they are from. She said it made her believe in a better future for her students." The audience clapped softly, and Caroline held up the letter like cherishing a precious gift. The host sipped coffee from a mug with his name on it, keeping the energy lively. "So is making an impact right here in America." Caroline nodded, her eyes blazing. "Exactly. His words about compassion, about listening, they're not just for the Vatican, they're for every town from Seattle to Miami." She opened the letter, reading aloud: "Pope Prevost gives me hope to keep going. Just a few words, but they hit me." She looked up at the audience. "That's the power of faith. It reminds us we belong to each other." The audience applauded, some standing emotions swelling. Caroline continued, her voice stronger: "I'll share something personal. When I'm running the press room or playing with my son, faith keeps me grounded." Pope Provost election. It felt like a sign, a call to bring faith into our work, our communities. The camera zoomed in, capturing the sincerity in her eyes. The host nodded. "Sounds like is inspiring you." Directly, Caroline smiled. He is, and not just me, millions of Americans feel it too. The room buzzed with energy, the audience hanging on her words. The host tried steering back to politics. Unity is a tough word in this divided country. How does this align with the president's agenda? Caroline answered swiftly. It aligns perfectly. President Thompson talks about strength, economic strength, border strength, values. Pope Prevost's message of compassion. That's strength too. It builds an America where everyone has a place. Thunderous applause erupted, the audience cheering. A warm silence settled as the clapping faded. Caroline glanced at her son's photo, then turned to the host. I've kept quiet about this side of me for too long, focusing on policy briefings, but tonight I want to share something. The room hushed, all eyes on her. She looked directly into the camera. Pope Prevost's election isn't just a moment for Catholics, it's a chance for us to come together, rebuild trust, make America stronger. Her words rippled through the studio like a gentle wave. The host moved, asked softly, Caroline, what made you speak about this tonight? She smiled, touching her cross necklace. Being a mom changes you. You think about the world your kid will grow up in. When I heard Pope Prevost talk about peace, about listening, I thought that's the America I want, and I know I'm not alone. She pulled a small, colorful card from her pocket adorned with a child drawing. This is from a girl in Tampa, Florida. She drew a dove and wrote, Pope Prevost says we can be friends. I kept it because it's so simple yet so meaningful. The audience stilled, not from tension but from emotion. Caroline set the card down, her voice gentle. I didn't plan to talk about this tonight, but when you mentioned Pope Prevost, I felt I had to share. His message reminds us we don't need to agree on everything to care about each other. She looked at the host, her gaze steady. That's what I learn every day, whether at the White House or home with my son. Applause roared again, warmer than ever. Caroline sat there calm, but radiant, as if she'd ignited a spark of hope. The interview was no longer just a chat. It had become a call for unity, a reminder that faith and hope can guide the way. Caroline Leavitt smiled, pulling a new card from her pocket, not worn or mysterious, but vibrant with clear handwritten text. She placed it gently on the table between her and the host. This was sent to my office a few months ago. She said, her voice warm. I kept it because it's special. The host leaned in, curious. Who's it from? Caroline, she looked at the card, her eyes treating it like a cherished keepsake, both familiar and significant. It's from a veteran in Dallas, Texas. He wrote to me after hearing Pope Robert Prevost's first speech from the Vatican. She paused, addressing the audience. He didn't ask for anything, just wanted to share that the Pope's words made him feel heard, understood. She slid the card toward the host, who regarded it with respect. On the card, a simple symbol, a cross beside a dove. I thought it